Something extraordinary is happening in Iran right now. Not behind closed doors, not in secret meetings, but openly, on streets that were once quiet. People are standing where fear once ruled. Voices are rising where silence was enforced. And a nation that endured for decades is now asking one question out loud. How much longer can this continue? This is not just another protest. This is not just about prices or politics. This is about a breaking point. And today, you're going to understand why Iran has reached it. What people truly want from their leadership, and why this moment feels different from anything before. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not shown clearly anywhere else. Let's begin with real life. Not slogans, not headlines, but ordinary people. Imagine a father walking into a grocery store, checking prices twice, then putting items back on the shelf. Picture a university student realizing their small salary can no longer even cover transportation to work. Think of a shop owner opening his store each morning, knowing that profit has completely disappeared. This is the reality millions in Iran are facing every single day. The national currency has weakened dramatically. Prices for basic goods have climbed so rapidly that many things are now out of reach. Basic needs, like food, housing, and medicine, have become incredibly difficult to manage. For countless families, survival itself feels uncertain. And when daily life becomes this unbearable, people don't stay silent forever. History has shown us that. At first, the gatherings were small. People spoke quietly among themselves about costs, about the lack of jobs, about their deteriorating living conditions. But then something changed. The frustration didn't just disappear, it connected. It spread from person to person, from neighborhood to neighborhood. Markets closed in solidarity. University students joined the calls. Workers stepped forward, demanding to be heard. And women raised their voices, becoming a powerful force at the forefront of these gatherings. Soon, what started in one city had spread to another, and then another. What began as an economic concern slowly transformed into something much deeper, much more fundamental. A challenge to authority itself. People were no longer just asking for economic relief, they were asking for answers. They were demanding accountability. And this is where misunderstanding often happens, especially for those watching from the outside. Many assume that everyone in the streets wants the exact same thing, but that's not true. The voices you hear represent a wide range of hopes and dreams for the future, but they all share common ground. People are asking for a stable economy where they can plan for tomorrow. They're asking for fair opportunities, not a system where connections matter more than merit. They are demanding transparency and accountability from their leaders. Above all, they're asking for a future that feels possible again. A future where their children can aspire to more than just getting by. But beyond these specific demands, a single powerful idea has emerged that unites them all. Decisions should not be untouchable. This message is at the very heart of today's movement. It's not about just one policy or one law. It's about the fundamental way that power works in the country. To really understand the protests, you have to understand Iran's political structure. At the very top is the supreme leader. This role is not symbolic. It's the most powerful position in the nation. It directly influences the security institutions, the judiciary's decisions, media control, the military's direction, and key political outcomes. For many Iranians, this immense concentration of authority in one place has become a central concern. So when people chant slogans in the streets today, they are expressing something very specific. It's a rejection of absolute, unaccountable control. This is why the supreme leader's name often appears in these chants. It's not just about personal emotion. It's because he represents the system itself. The very structure they feel is holding them back. Every movement has a moment, a tipping point, when emotion finally overtakes fear. For Iran, that moment came through countless personal stories. Stories of young people facing severe consequences simply for speaking their minds. Stories of families watching their loved ones disappear from public life after being detained. Stories of entire communities feeling like they were being watched and controlled, instead of being protected by their government. These experiences spread like wildfire through social media videos, private messages, and whispered conversations. And once people saw that they were not alone in their suffering, that their neighbor felt the same way, that a stranger in another city shared their pain, something irreversible happened. Fear began to lose its grip. In response, officials have really taken a two-pronged approach. Publicly, they've acknowledged the economic difficulties, admitting that people are struggling. But privately, they've tightened their control. Demonstrations have been labeled as disorder or foreign-backed plots. Participants have been warned of dire consequences, and the security presence on the streets has increased dramatically. The message from the authorities has been clear. Change will not come easily. But the pressure from the people didn't disappear. It only grew stronger. So, why does this time feel different? Iran has seen unrest before, in other years. But this moment stands out for a few key reasons. First, the movement is wider, spanning more cities and social classes than ever before. Second, the participants are younger, a generation that has grown up connected to the world and expects more from their future. Third, the demands are clearer and more direct. And finally, the fear barrier is weaker than it has been in a long, long time. People are no longer just asking, can we survive? They are now asking a much more profound question. Why should we have to live like this at all? And that question changes everything. Now, one very important clarification needs to be made here. Some of the slogans you might hear are emotional expressions, not formal legal demands. When people use extreme language, it doesn't mean they are calling for official punishments or courtroom outcomes against specific individuals. It's a symbolic act. It means a total rejection of authority. It signifies deep anger at unaccountable power. It's a desire for an end to the current structure. Understanding this distinction is crucial. This is a symbolic revolt, not a legal procedure. One of the strongest and most inspiring forces in today's movement is the youth. They grew up with the internet, connected to the world. They see the opportunities that young people have in other countries, and they question the restrictions placed on their own lives. And women, especially, have become highly visible and powerful voices. They are not asking quietly for their rights anymore. They are demanding them loudly and fearlessly. Their presence and their courage have completely reshaped the energy of this movement. This isn't just a protest. It's a generational shift happening right before our eyes. Of course, the world is watching. Outside of Iran, reactions are mostly cautious. Some governments express concern. Others issue formal statements. Media coverage increases when the protests are at their peak. But inside Iran, many of the protesters are very clear about one thing. They want change to come from within their own country, not to be imposed from the outside. For them, this is about national dignity and self-determination. So today, Iran stands at a crossroads, a moment of profound choice. One path leads to deeper control, more restrictions, and a continuation of the status quo. The other path leads to transformation, to a new chapter for the nation. No one knows for sure what the outcome will be. But one thing is absolutely undeniable. The silence has been broken. And once a society finds its voice and begins to speak openly, history never moves backward in the same way again. This story is far from over. By now, one question dominates conversations inside Iran, whispered at first, now spoken openly. Do people want change within the system, or do they want the system itself to end? This isn't a simple yes or no question, because Iran's protest movement is not a single voice, it is a chorus. Some voices are cautious, some are bold, some want improvement, others want a complete reset. Understanding this difference is the key to understanding what may happen next. Let's be clear and factual. There is no single unified leadership directing these protests, no official manifesto, no one speaker. Instead, there are two major currents flowing through the streets. The first is the reform-focused group. These are people who believe that the system can be fixed from within. They want better economic management, less corruption, more accountability from those in power, and greater daily freedoms. They believe pressure can force meaningful changes without dismantling the entire structure. This view is common among older generations, business owners, and professionals, people who often fear the instability that could follow a complete collapse. The second group is the system change group. They believe the structure itself prevents any real reform. In their view, authority is too concentrated at the top, and promises of change have been made before and then broken. They argue that only a fundamental shift, a complete replacement of the system, can create lasting change. This view is especially strong among the youth, students, activists, and many women who are on the front lines. Both of these groups are protesting, but they have very different end goals. This internal divide is real, it's documented, and it's crucial to understanding the situation. So why is there so much focus on the top? Factually speaking, Iran's political system gives the supreme leader unmatched influence. This isn't an opinion, it's written into the structure of the state. The supreme leader oversees key security institutions like the Revolutionary Guards, has the final say over judicial appointments, and shapes foreign and defense policy. His authority sits above all elected officials, including the president. Because of this, many Iranians believe that real, lasting change cannot happen without addressing this concentration of power. This explains why public frustration increasingly points upward. It's not just personal emotion, it's a conclusion drawn from institutional logic. Now, what do official statements tell us? When we look at verified public statements from Iranian leadership, a consistent pattern emerges. They acknowledge economic challenges. They blame external pressure and foreign enemies for stirring up trouble. They frame the protests as disorder or riots, not as legitimate political demands. And most importantly, they reject the core political demands for structural change. This approach has been used repeatedly over the years. What's different now is the scale and persistence of public dissatisfaction. Acknowledging the pain without offering a structural response hasn't reduced the pressure. In fact, for many, it has only increased their skepticism. Let's ground this in facts, not emotion, because the economy is at the heart of this. For several consecutive years, Iran's economy has faced severe challenges. We're talking about high inflation that eats away at savings, a currency that has lost much of its value, and a sharp drop in the purchasing power of ordinary families. On top of that, youth unemployment remains a massive problem. These aren't just claims. These are facts confirmed by international economic reports, regional financial data, and independent analysts. When economic stress lasts this long, it stops being a temporary problem and becomes a systemic one. And history teaches us that systemic economic pressure always creates political consequences. This leads us to the youth factor, a generation that feels it has nothing to lose. More than half of Iran's population is under 35. This is a generation that is digitally connected. They see what life is like outside Iran through the internet. They compare their opportunities to those of their peers around the world. And they are questioning the official narratives they grew up with. They didn't experience the early years of the revolution, so their expectations for the future are completely different. For them, being told to be patient feels like being told to accept stagnation. And when a large portion of young people stop believing that tomorrow will be better than today, societies enter dangerous territory. This isn't speculation. It's a historical pattern we've seen time and again. At the same time, the visible presence of women in these protests has changed everything. Women are not new to public life in Iran, but their leadership and visibility in recent movements have increased dramatically. This matters for a few key reasons. Women experience social restrictions in a very direct and personal way. Economic hardship often impacts households first, and women are usually the ones managing those households. Cultural controls affect their daily lives, from what they can wear to what they can study. Their powerful participation has shifted the protests from being just about economic complaints to being about fundamental questions of identity, dignity, and personal freedom. And when dignity becomes the central issue, finding a compromise becomes much harder. This creates a standoff between security and society. Every state relies on stability mechanisms to maintain order, and Iran is no different. But history shows a clear rule. When the gap between what society wants and what the authorities are willing to give becomes too wide, Enforcement alone cannot restore trust. Pressure can pause a movement. It can clear the streets for a while, but it cannot erase the underlying causes of the anger. This creates a long-term standoff. On one side, you have the authority seeking to maintain control. On the other, you have society pushing for change. The longer this dynamic lasts, the more unpredictable the outcome becomes. So, is the system at risk of collapse? This is where we have to be very precise. There is no verified evidence to suggest that the current leadership is on the verge of an immediate collapse. The core institutions of the state remain intact. The security forces remain organized and loyal. The basic functions of the government continue. However, there is verified evidence of deep questions about the system's legitimacy. Persistent and widespread public dissatisfaction, a widening gap of trust between the people and the state, and repeated cycles of protest. This indicates a state of long-term instability, not immediate collapse. That distinction is important, and it's the responsible way to analyze the situation. Based on historical patterns and current facts, experts generally outline a few possible paths forward. The first scenario is one of limited economic adjustments. The government might offer some small relief measures to ease the financial pain, leading to a temporary calm. But the underlying issues would remain, likely causing problems to flare up again later. A second scenario is controlled reform. This would involve selective policy changes, perhaps loosening some social rules, while keeping political boundaries tight. This could create short-term stabilization. A third scenario is prolonged tension, which is what we've been seeing. Recurring protests met with periodic crackdowns, while the economy continues to struggle. The fourth scenario is a structural shift that happens over time. This wouldn't be a sudden revolution, but a gradual change where internal realignment and sustained pressure slowly reshape how the country is governed. No serious analyst claims to know for sure which path it will be. History rarely moves in a straight line. What about the international angle? Foreign governments have issued statements of concern. They've warned against the use of excessive force and are monitoring developments closely. However, there is no confirmed plan for international intervention. Most external actors are remaining cautious. They're aware that obvious outside pressure often backfires, allowing the government to rally support by pointing to a foreign enemy. This reinforces one simple reality. Any lasting change, whatever form it takes, must ultimately come from within Iranian society itself. So why does this moment still matter, even if the streets grow quieter? Even if the protests slow down, a profound psychological shift has already happened. People have spoken openly about things that were once only whispered. They have tested the boundaries of what is possible. They have seen the power of collective action. And for many, the barrier of fear has been broken. That is something that cannot be easily undone. History shows us that once a population crosses this kind of psychological threshold, the relationship between the authority and the society is permanently altered. Ultimately, this story is not just about one leader or one protest. It's about a nation asking itself fundamental questions. Who decides our future? Who holds power accountable? And what kind of life is acceptable? Those questions don't just disappear, they wait, they linger, and they will continue to shape the future of Iran for years to come. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis helpful, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into complex global issues.